Frito-Lay company in Southern California, in 1981, there was an employee named Richard Montañez. He was responsible for janitorial and cleaning duties at the company. Now, what does Frito-Lay do? Frito-Lay is currently owned by Pepsi, and its main business is producing various types of chips, with Cheetos being one of the most famous ones. Richard Montañez, in his memories, writes that whenever he went to the store and bought chips produced by the company, Frito-Lay, he found them bland and did not taste good. It was only salty and potato or corn taste. It's interesting to note that Richard Montañez wasn't American. He was Mexican, and Mexican foods are usually spicier and have more seasoning. In his memories, Richard mentions that one day he bought a bag of these chips and decided to add his spices to make them more flavorful. Richard didn't know that by doing this, he was creating one of the most famous chips in the world, Hot Cheetos. When he realized he liked the chips he made, he believed others would like them too. To make it happen, he tried to contact the CEO of Frito-Lay, a person named Roger Enrico. When Richard called, no one connected him to Roger's office, but he persisted until they finally did. Richard told Roger, "I've created a special kind of Cheetos, and I'm sure you'll love them." Roger replied, "I'm not in California right now, but when I come back in 2 weeks, bring the chips and I'll see." Richard Montañez, with limited education, couldn't write or speak eloquently. Nevertheless, he prepared 100 small bags of the chips he had created and took them to the factory, distributing them to all employees. Not only did the factory workers like these chips, but the company's executives were also impressed. They immediately struck a deal to add these chips to the factory's production line. Before this incident, Frito-Lay didn't have spicy chips. The company realized it could be the first in America to introduce spicy chips to the market. After these chips became everyone's favorite, Frito-Lay sent Richard back to school to improve his education. Later, he became part of the company's executive team. It's indeed an interesting story, but let's pause the video for a moment and share another story with you. In 2018, a woman named Lynn Greenfeld came across an article describing how an employee invented Hot Cheetos. Shocked, she said, "Why is it credited to a person named Richard?" Lynn contacted Frito-Lay, questioning the story. A few days later, after Lynn's protest, Frito-Lay's legal team told the Los Angeles Times that their archives showed no evidence of Richard Montañez inventing Hot Cheetos. They stated that they had no idea where this story came from. In his memoirs, Richard wrote, "In the 80s, I thought of making these bland chips spicy. The story Frito-Lay was spreading doesn't make sense at all." Since spicy chips, including Hot Cheetos, were not originally invented in California, but rather in Chicago during the 1980s, the story takes an unexpected turn. In Chicago, spicy chips had gained popularity, prompting Frito-Lay employees in the area to decide to produce their own spicy chips to meet the market demand. One of the key individuals working on the project to make chips spicy at Frito-Lay in Chicago was Lynn Greenfeld. Now, the situation becomes a bit peculiar, because Richard Montañez claims to have presented his chips to the Frito-Lay executives, and they liked them. This creates a paradox, as the Frito-Lay team in Chicago, led by Lynn Greenfeld, was already working on making spicy chips in response to consumer demand. Now, with Richard speaking in front of the Frito-Lay executives and claiming they loved his chips, it becomes a complex situation. Perhaps the executive team could shed light on who actually made these chips. American journalists were susceptible to this situation, as it added an intriguing layer to the narrative. They wanted to get to the bottom of it, to see what was going on. So, wherever the Frito-Lay executive team went, reporters followed them, asking questions about the situation. In response to these questions, the executives usually said, "We do not know what's going on. We've never heard of it before." Some even claimed that if such a story existed, they would have known about it. But the more reporters inquired, the story became more complex. As a reminder, at the beginning of our clip, we mentioned that Richard Montañez contacted Frito-Lay's management, specifically a person named Roger Enrico. Interestingly, Mr. Enrico became the CEO of Frito-Lay in the mid-1990s, 6 months after Hot Cheetos were introduced to the market. This means that Mr. Roger Enrico wasn't involved in the creation of Hot Cheetos. Richard Montañez's memoirs, now a famous and best-selling book, mention Mr. Roger Enrico around 60 times, crediting him for the success of Hot Cheetos. This contradicts the timeline, as Enrico wasn't actively involved when Hot Cheetos were launched. Reporters don't let go of the story. They keep digging until they find out that Richard Montañez wasn't originally an employee of the company, he wasn't uneducated, and he wasn't in the role of a janitor as initially portrayed. Instead, he was a salesman for the company. However, in this narrative, he's portrayed as an uneducated employee. In summary, as reporters delve deeper, they discover that Richard Montañez wasn't an employee and wasn't uneducated. He was a seasoned marketer working for Frito-Lay. He had a plan. He created a fictional story, turned it into a memoir, and sold it, capitalizing on the success of Hot Cheetos. The book is still being sold today, and if you do a quick search on Google for Richard Montañez Flamin Hot, you can find and purchase the book if interested. The success of this book likely contributes to the continued success of Hot Cheetos sales. Frito-Lay executives remain silent about the matter, seemingly content with what Richard Montañez calls the Cheetos scam. The intriguing part is that the story continues. Richard Montañez insists that he invented these chips, and Lynn Greenfeld also claims credit. Frito-Lay benefits from this story as it draws attention to the company. However, some people consider it a deceptive form of advertising. What are your thoughts on this matter? Please leave us a comment. I hope you enjoyed watching this video.
Like moving boulders just to get out of the home, it sucks. I've had enough, I don't wanna feel the stuck under the rug, all my problems that I shove. I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.